Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of NDNABA with Martin and Dan. I'm your host, Martin. Alongside of me is my co-host, Dan. Wow, I know we had a little wacky gap in between our first and second episode, but you know what? Glad to be back.
Yeah, definitely. And we were really excited to have you guys come on and listen to our talk about therapy that gets autism with Brice Lange. But we did have to make a few little changes to our schedule while we fix some technical difficulties and wait for the best time to interview her. So today we decided to give you a special treat, and we actually invited our good friend, Michelle Zeman, also known as the Autistic Behavior Analyst on Instagram and star of the Safe Space ABA podcast. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Oh, yeah. Michelle is a perfect example of what we like to promote on this show, both a perspective on neurodiversity and a perspective on ABA, which we feel is paramount in this time of conversation, in this time of revisions and explorations of solutions that we can offer the field, employee wise, consumer wise, and generally in a psychologically safe manner how we might go about in affecting those solutions. So, Michelle, you do a lot of advocacy on your own. I wonder if you would like to maybe say a few things on how that has affected your career and what are some of the things that really inspire you to keep on promoting conversation and fulfilling your role as a behavior analyst.
Yeah, so self advocacy has seriously impacted my career in a lot of different ways. First of all, as an autistic person, I do struggle sometimes with communicating my own wants and needs in a way that is eloquent and professional. And so, having to learn about advocating for myself in front of not only like my bosses, but also in front of local leaders within my community has seriously helped me do that. I have been able to go to different representatives, talk about a variety of issues happening in the state of Florida, such as supported decision making and guardianships. I have also talked about neurodiversity practices at our own job, different ways that I can be accommodated. For example, I'm somebody who you can talk to me and it goes in one ear right out the other. If I don't have any sort of visual guide or any sort of script or any sort of something other than just like a one to one conversation, I'm not going to remember the information. And so, one thing that I've had to do as a way to ask for my own accommodations is be able to voice myself and say, listen, you're telling me these things and it's not sticking because you're just talking to me. One way to support me is to give me these accommodations. And I feel like because of that, I've seriously been able to make a lot of really positive change within my own career. And it's also, funny enough, inspired other people to advocate for the same things. I notice when I've asked for those types of accommodations, other people have picked up on that and have said, you know what? You make a really good point. Like I think I could use that too. And it's not like piggybacking off of my accommodations, but it's just something that is helpful for them as well. And so I think between that really inspires me. Being able to advocate and being able to speak up and say something on behalf of myself, on behalf of the disability community within my area. I know that I'm one autistic person, but I'm one autistic person with a very loud voice. And I will make that very abundantly clear because, if I don't use my advocacy, if I don't use my voice, I'm going to end up in the corner. And that's not where as whether that be an autistic person or, a non autistic person, no one deserves to be like that. No one deserves to be in the corner and be
Hmm,
silenced.
very
Absolutely.
well
I
said.
wonder Does that resonate with you, Martin? I know you definitely have that kind of effect in your advocacy as well. You raise up the voice of autistic people everywhere. And I wonder if that maybe part of why you call it Spire, to be sort of an elevated perspective for people to look at and see, here's what we can do, here's how we can do better, right?
In a way, yes. I do have a question, Michelle, because when you're talking about self-advocacy, what are some pointers for autistics who struggle with self-advocacy, especially in like a work setting? Because I still struggle with that. I don't like talking about it, but I just feel like, you brought up a good point about, I mean, yeah, self-advocacy is super important, but are there any like pointers you can give to somebody who struggles with that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I have found is, first I identify a common occurring problem, and even if it's a problem that has only happened once, one time is more than enough. So, for example, I remember being told about all of these different policies and changes that were happening at my job, but there was nothing to support that. There was no visual, there was no handbook, there was nothing. And so I saw that as being a problem. And I said, okay, we need to change this. We need to do something about this. So the first thing is identifying a problem for me. And then the next thing I do is I try to practice how I'm going to write it or how I'm going to say it, because I'm somebody who, you know, gives a little bit of pushback and sometimes can come off a little bit intense. And it's never meant to come off that way. But when I'm passionate about something, I tend to overexert myself a little bit. And so I have to almost practice and rehearse. So I almost have to script everything that I'm going to say. There was even like one meeting, for example, where my boss was actually just getting promoted and she just like officially started this position. And I was like, okay, I know I need to meet with this person and I have so many things that I need to say. So for me, I had to write out like an entire list of things that were issues for me and that I needed to make sure that I got out there, especially, she needed to know these things so that way she could be successful within her role and she could best support me. So what I did was I basically came up with that list and I ended up, believe it or not, I ended up actually rehearsing some of that too. What I did was I basically rehearsed my script out in my room. One of the things that I tend to do is I tend to do like my own version of vocal scripting outside of work. And I do my own version of vocal scripting because it does help me communicate my thoughts and opinions better. I feel as though if I am improving everything, it just comes off a little bit too harsh, or I may come off as being too emotional. And I'm definitely an emotional person. So I have to almost like hone that in and then actually rehearse everything. And funny enough, I did almost cry on that particular phone call on at least 4 different occasions. So, it's one of those things where even if it's not a perfect landing, you're at least trying, you're at least expressing yourself. And, so for me, I would say identifying the problem, writing it out, even if it helps you to like rehearse what you're going to say, or if you're going to write it in an eloquent email. Also, when it comes to emails, following up really, really helps. I'm somebody who does have email reminders. If I don't get a question answered within like 24 hours, or even like sometimes I see where like certain staff members will read my messages and I'll get left on read and I'll be like, this is an issue. Come on, like let's do something about this. So, and it comes off again as a little bit intense, but it's something that I feel like I have to do because of the fact that if I don't follow up on the issue that I'm having, no one else is going to do it for me. So I have to continue to advocate for myself. I don't want my voice to be punished just because someone is not listening to me. So
Hmm.
that's my biggest piece of advice.
Really, really well said. Definitely.
Oh yeah, a lot of that resonates with me as well, especially as a behavior analyst when there is a lot of emphasis on company culture wherever you go. And so if you do happen to have maybe a suggestion for positive change, even if it's positive change, it can be very hard to continue to advocate for it. And you need as much opportunity as you can to have that space. One of the things I'm really glad that we brought you on for this week is to maybe talk about how health and wellness initiatives across company culture can be implemented. What are some reds and green flags? We talked a little on your show, the Safe Space ABA podcast, which if you guys haven't checked it out, please go give it a listen. It's on Spotify as well. We talked about how NCR can apply to all things, not just applied behavior analysis, but also just in our daily lives and in our jobs. And so one of those things that sets off dopamine in your brain that gives you a non-contingent boost of reinforcement is feeling empathy from your employers, from those around you, and feeling like you're seen and you're heard and that your thoughts matter. So just that acknowledgement alone, and it really is just acknowledgement first, right? Replying to that email that you followed up on, yes, we're still working on it. Yes, it's important to us. We apologize for the delay, even, right? That's okay. And again, when you apologize, some people may not want to admit that there's any fault, but it's okay sometimes to own up to there always being room to improve, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hilarious that you even say like the sorry for the delay thing, because I even sometimes wish for that email or that message to come through, because sometimes that doesn't happen, and that's not company specific. That is ABA, like all around this field. And the podcast that I host, Safe Space, the ABA podcast, you know, I come on and I talk a lot about different topics on Safe Space, the ABA podcast, but I also try to provide a safe space within my own realm of supervision too. When I'm talking with technicians, when I'm, meeting with my technicians that I supervise, but then I try to create a safe space for other technicians as well, because, again, I'm somebody who advocates for myself, but the technicians that I work with are also the ones that are on the ground working tremendously hard at what they do. And the weight that they carry, the physical weight that they carry doing direct ABA services is not easy. And so for me, having that space to allow my technicians to come to me and say, "Hey, Michelle, I really want to talk to you about this. I'm feeling all kinds of things." I encourage that. I encourage the feedback. I encourage all of the feedback, whether it be, that you feel fantastic and you feel confident, or you just genuinely are in a stuck position. And I'm also somebody who will also take the time to acknowledge, you know, believe it or not, like this may seem very cliche, but we do staff shout outs at my job every couple weeks. And I'm one of the people who will find one positive thing in like a 15-minute time sample practically within my supervision. So probably in total between like 4 to 8 different positive things. And 9.5 times out of 10, you're going to see your name if I supervise you, because I want to acknowledge the work that you're doing on the ground, because you do carry the weight. So again, I feel that it's very important to provide that space. I don't just follow up to annoy people or to make them feel like they have to just be on top of it. I do it because I need you to pay attention to the work that we're doing. You may be on the other side, but here we are fighting on the field. My technicians are fighting on the ground, working with the clients. Our supervisors are the backbones, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that everyone has what they need. And that's all we need is a response, even if it's, "Hey, sorry about that. We'll get back to you, I promise." A response is better than no response, in my opinion. So
Totally. And you just reminded me, thank you so much, to everybody who's out there right now simultaneously trying to advocate for change and seeing the best in people to give them some affirmation, some praise, some acknowledgement at the same time, motivating positive behavior and positive change. Give yourself a pat on the back, or maybe two, because you deserve it, and really all it is as simple as that. Maybe just, hey, I recognize so and so for doing this, or as some might say, attaboy, or attagirl, or whatever you want to say. It's really important to maintain that consistent level of non-contingent reinforcement, and maybe even assume that everybody needs a certain amount of acknowledgement daily in order to feel acknowledged, human, and maybe enthusiastic, happy, relaxed, engaged throughout the day, and be able to perhaps go home and maybe brag a little bit, like, I have a great job and I love it, it's great. Give them something to brag about, because just them doing that alone, having positive thoughts that carry out throughout the day, will reinforce the likelihood of wanting to maintain roles, places, decrease turnover, increase wellness, and we hope it'll have that atmosphere of psychological safety become a regular occurring company culture aspect we see all the time. And maybe we can even start to take for granted again. But for now, don't take it for granted, right? Everything somebody is doing, right, to help your psychological safety. Uh, we hope you guys see that, and maybe that can help to point you into who's a good person to guide in mentorship situations, and how you might go about uh, managing a difficult transition throughout your career, and what are some avenues going forward that you might explore. These are people you can trust, people who provide non-contingent reinforcement that you can rely on. So maybe look out for those, and that can possibly be a safe space that you can enter. Michelle, anything you might want to add on that?
I mean, I think you nailed it right on the head. You want to create, like, to the BCBAs and BCABAs out there, who are supervising technicians. The thing is, you're the captain of the ship, right? And yes, your programs, what you do for your families, everyone relies on you, right? But also, in order to get buy-in, you do have to create a safe space. Maybe it looks something different for you, but for me, it is simply just having my chats open. It is simply recognizing when my technicians do very positive things. It is simply, I actually create a group chat for my technicians, and I will write very positive things for my technicians, so that way they can read over it and they can have, a good start to the day or a good end to the week. You know, Safe spaces look very different for everybody, but everybody deserves to have access to one, whether that be in the form of a group chat, a message, whatever that looks like. Um, you have to be able to come into work and feel good mentally, because this is a very exhausting job. We deal with a lot of different extraneous variables. Sometimes we have, those parents who just want to do things their way and not necessarily follow what we're doing, and they fight with us sometimes. Sometimes we have clients who are just having a really rough day. Sometimes, there's trauma that's involved. So this job can be very mentally, physically, and psychologically exhausting for all parties involved. And so it's really important to make sure that, if you're not feeling at 100%, you have that safe space, so that way you can go to somebody and say, hey, you know what, I'm really not at 100, I'm at 75. Even 75 is still, 25% difference right there. Even just the other day, just to give you an idea of how great my technicians are and how much of a safe space my techs have. Not only have I created a safe space for my techs, but my techs have also created a safe space for me. um, the other day, I was on a supervision and I felt horrible for this technician, but I thought I was going to fall asleep. And I was like, I can't do this and expect you to give, I can't give you my best self right now. And so I actually ended up reaching out to a few people, asked if I could have just like a point of contact for the rest of the night so I could focus on myself. And then I also reached out to my group chat that I have with all of my technicians and said, hey, unfortunately tonight I am not doing too great. I'm super exhausted. I'm at the point of falling asleep. I have a point of contact if there's any emergencies. Please take care of yourself, and I will see you guys tomorrow. And it was kind of amazing to see the outpour of support of you cannot be your best self and like not take care of yourself at the same time. And so I was really happy that that was reciprocated. It just goes to show you that when you model that type of behavior, that behavior does get reciprocated in the end. If you're not creating that safe space, then they're not going to create a safe space for you too. So it's really important to make sure that that safe space is created for every party involved.
Definitely. And yeah, you touched on it and hit the nail right back on the head. I was definitely thinking that it's important for parents, even though sometimes it is hard, and sometimes I know that clinical teams and families sometimes butt heads on certain issues, to remember that we intend and really aspire to be that safe space for you and your family and your children who are consumers of ABA services. And yeah, I really want to maybe highlight some of the things that Martin shares in his YouTube channel. If you guys have seen it, it's important for you guys to find a way to show the families, and I guess I'm talking to technicians and BCBAs here, show the families that you really are there to be that hero, to help them with this and that, without judgment, without a timeline that they're rushing against, with just patience and understanding. And Martin, I was wondering, maybe in your experience as a clinician, how this resonates with you, since Michelle and I are both BCBAs.
Boy, I am having a tough time coming up with an answer for you. I'm going to be honest, because I haven't really experienced it, I guess, per se, but I know there's some things that I you know what? I don't have an answer yet.
Maybe partially due to the fact that it's very few and far between, and I think that perhaps I was wondering, because as an RBT, it's often neglected to think about having a safe space, because when businesses are looking at their RBT setup, unfortunately, they also consider the fact that there's very high turnover rate in the field. And so there's high risk in the employer's eyes of finding ways to spend resources, allocate finances towards bolstering RBT health and wellness when they think they're going to leave. But if you think about it that way, you can already start to see this is like a slippery slope that only leads down. We should maybe be thinking that perhaps the lower the health and wellness promotions become, the more likely it is that, of course, that our turnover rate will increase. So we should bolster them, of course, and create those safe spaces so that RBTs, as well as BCBAs, regardless of if they're internal, external employees, salary, hourly contract, and or even recruiters, even compensation-based members of organizations, no matter who you are, if you're involved in doing this work, this is something that does a lot of good. And I think that your health and wellness deserves to be looked out for as much as you're trying to look out for the consumers, right? So if you haven't seen that, Martin, on behalf of BCBAs everywhere, I definitely apologize to you, because
no, that's fine.
It's again, it's something that we need to promote in this field, is valuing the RBTs, holding them up as high as we can, supporting them financially and also educationally, and as well as with benefits that foster them to thrive, right?
Right.
I
But it's
agree.
like, yeah, because it's like, I'm going to admit I don't really talk a whole lot about it, only because I've been told it's like a taboo topic.
And it shouldn't be.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
shouldn't.
It shouldn't be, but it's like because from like the past where yeah, it's hard to explain, but that's kind of from people telling me that in the past. That's why I keep it mostly to myself, and I've been focused. I know it's probably not a good idea, but I've been focusing on helping others with their self advocacy and self care, and then kind of wait until or kind of wait on focusing on my own because it's I don't know. I'm trying to break that habit.
Yeah, and I get that. I get that, I remember when I was a technician, I didn't feel that I had a safe space within my supervisors at all. And I knew that I needed to undo that. I remember when I even first became a BCBA, I had a great supervisor when I was a BT. The RBT credential was very new when I became a BCBA. So keep in mind, so that's how long I've been a BCBA for. But that being said, this person became my mentor. And at first I was really excited because they were such a fantastic supervisor for me. But once they became my mentor, no, they were no longer like that support system for me. And I knew that I had to undo a lot of that. I had to undo a lot of that work. And I ended up actually learning, yes, it's important to be able to know how to run certain skills assessments. It's great to know how to write a report that's insurance compliant. It's great to be able to write a flawless, mostly flawless behavior intervention plan because there's no such thing as 100% flawless. Um, but if you are not showing the respect to your technicians, and if you are not modeling that type of leadership, then quite frankly, and this is gonna sound controversial, you probably shouldn't be a BCBA. And the reason for that is because you spent your hours feeling I'm sure that BCBAs on here that have been BTs and RBTs have probably spent time feeling unappreciated, feeling like, their work is going nowhere because they've done 20, 30, 40 hours of direct services on a weekly basis with what feels like very little to show for. And now I'm having to almost like guide people and sort of like explain, listen, you guys are out there so many hours a week. I see a very small image of what you see, and you see a small version of what the family sees. I'm a guest in everybody's lives, the patient's life, the family's life, my technician's life, my company's life. I'm a guest. And if I'm not giving the respect of showing them that, I am this, I am a guest and that's all I am, how am I going to be successful? So that's why it's that much more important too to remember 4 letters after your name doesn't really mean a whole lot when you think about it in the grand scheme of things. You passed the test, congratulations. Now show that you can be a good model, a good leader, a compassionate leader. Show that you care, because what you're doing in this field is changing lives. And if the point of what we do is to help our clients' lives for the better, we need to not only help our clients, but we need to help everybody involved. And that includes coordinating care with providers. That includes talking to teachers, talking to outside providers. You are one piece of the equation. It takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to raise each other up too.
Well said, absolutely. And again, it's another reason why I'm really glad to have you participating in our upcoming event, the US Autism Show, on November 2nd. We'll be virtually streaming as well as having in-person presentations out here in Hawaii. So keep a lookout for anything you've seen, our pre-registration links. Keep a lookout for Michelle's podcast, Safe Space, the ABA podcast on Spotify, as well as her Instagram, the Autistic Behavior Analyst. And before we run out of time, Michelle, I'm wondering if there is anything else that you might want to put the spotlight on or raise awareness for today on our show.
Man, I would say, other than, my Instagram, other than the podcast, I think it's really important for BCBAs and even RBTs, BTs, anybody who works in the field, to get to know disability law and to get to know things that are happening within the disability community. We are stuck on, working on changing our clients' lives for themselves, but there's also things going on, like, for example, supported decision making was something that I talked a little bit about earlier today. We talk about least restrictive environment. Well, supported decision making is a less restrictive alternative to full guardianship. And full guardianship, there is a ton of guardianship abuse, unfortunately. I know someone who was in a guardianship for over 2 years. Full guardianship, he was conserved by a guardian and he was required to live in a group home. And it was heartbreaking for this person. And they were able to get out of it. They ended up sneaking a cell phone in, contacting Disability Rights Florida to get himself out of that particular conservatorship, and he was able to get all of his rights back. And so the reason why I bring this up is because, yes, we face a lot of things within our field. We deal with lives on a daily basis, but we also need to know how our clients' futures are going to be impacted. What if one of our clients ends up in a full guardianship like that? What if they end up not being able to make decisions for themselves and someone ends up having to become power of attorney and now every single decision is made for them? What if they end up in a group home? So it's really important to not only evaluate what we're working on within our ABA sessions, but to be able to see how disability law is being practiced. Definitely cannot encourage enough to talk to your local representatives about issues within the developmental disability community. And also just listening to autistic people, listening to developmentally disabled people really does help in a lot of different ways. So that way you can also not necessarily be an advocate for them, but be an ally when they are advocating.
Certainly. And again, it's another reason why I love working with Martin and I love promoting his work, both with first responders, his book, all the things that he does online to advocate, and, just in general, raising up perspectives of not only autistic people, but any person who feels underrepresented is very important. Because especially if you have the privilege to have a voice, you have a following on Spotify or LinkedIn, or you have the management ability at your job to make a difference. Anything that you can do to support neuro inclusion is really going to help everybody feel a little bit more comfortable in their job, and unmask a little bit as well. We all do it. We all have moments where we try to sort of appear as though we're adhering to something that makes us shy, makes us not want to really participate. And the less of that we have, again, the more comfortable people are going to feel, the less also of abuse that you mentioned that we see going on in these complicated legal situations, the more comfortable we will have families entering this service as consumers as well as employees staying in the field. So why, again, it's so important to know about, like you said earlier, special education law, there's IDEA, and there is ADA. But beyond that, there's things to know about, like how the Autism Cares Act affects you and how people are being treated in living care facilities in your state. These things vary. They're not just in a blanket sort of rule basis all over the United States. You're going to have to do a little bit of research to know how it affects you, but ultimately it's going to be worth it. And one of the most important things I felt like I was participating in this year is figuring out which issues are important to me and finding out which congressional members in Hawaii I could reach out to in order to effect some sort of change on important issues. Martin, you did it yourself this year in April, talking to the mayor in order to instill the declaration for autism acceptance and awareness for a month all over. And I'm hoping that we're going to see that again for years to come, things like that, just continuing onward, because it's more than a month, right? We're well beyond April now, and we're still talking about this. And it's also more than just people feeling slightly uncomfortable. So thank you for bringing up, getting real with us today, Michelle. Some of the more difficult topics that definitely weigh on both clinicians feeling clinician guilt for being associated with very unfortunate malpractice events in this field and outside, as well as consumers who feel extreme anxiety upon entering a relationship with ABA based on those events. Again, it's important to maybe acknowledge that these things are out there with some people, especially if they've heard about it already. For consumers that are concerned about it, let them know that you are there intentionally to be that safe space, and that certain practices that you have observed you would never want to implement in these scenarios is sometimes a very important first step in just taking away some of that anxiety that may be harming a relationship of safe space to begin with. Martin, do you have any maybe major things that potentially you might want to highlight that could cause anxiety for people entering the field as a consumer or employee?
Not getting the help that they need. And I know for some, I'm not like bashing anybody specific or anything. Like, I'm not that kind of person, but it's like, I know there's some higher ups that are just there to make a paycheck instead of really helping the new behavior specialist out that joined the field. And some parents have even told me, like, hey, I'm not really sure about ABA because I've heard a lot of bad things about it with all the malpractice and everything. But it's like, it's so important to build rapport right off the bat. Because I mean, like, it might not work out. I mean, I had a client where it didn't work out and that was okay, but communication is key. I'm just gonna be straight real with you. Communication is key, and quite frankly, there needs to be a change. Like, there needs to be more communication, and I'm trying to figure out the right words to say, because there is a lot of miscommunication out there, and it frustrates the clients' families, and it frustrates the BCBAs and higher ups, and it's like, something's got to change. Something's got to. And
Whether
I'm going
it's
to be,
right, mission-based miscommunication, not telling the full sequence of events or the truth, or misrepresenting them. I think what you said, it brings into the importance that you have to acknowledge that person, but you also have to acknowledge their concern and set a path to remedying that situation.
Right.
And I think that second and third step is often missing.
right.
Yeah,
And so, yeah.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, I think it's
No worries.
not only miscommunication, but I think there's judgment that's involved unnecessary
Yeah.
judgment.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm very familiar with that. I also did want to add too. I don't know if this could be a little controversial. I don't know, but if companies focused more on the quality of the services instead of the quantity of like expanding, then there wouldn't be all this negativity about ABA, and we could start seeing more qualitative sessions where clients' parents don't drop their services. And it's like, I mean, here in California, there's quite a bit of people still waiting for services, but it's like there's just a lot going on, and it's something needs to change. Like something needs to change if we want to start seeing a more positive impact instead of staying in that negative limelight.
Absolutely. And again, that's why, there is a huge green flag in showing companies that value the quality over the quantity. Because as you said, right, Martin, it's not that these clinicians are going in wanting to perform anything that is less than the best quality, right? But what happens is the quantity is pushed so high that the amount of gas they have in the tank for quality is so low, it may not occur. And if we're having the gas in the tank, after just working so many hours, not being there for quality, imagine what we have for when we're done with work, for our home life, for our family. This definitely creates a sort of pit of low psychological safety and wellness, and it's bad on both ends for the consumers and the employees. The consumers, one of the largest complaints I've heard in the field is that they've had so many changes in providers, and it sometimes breaks their kid's heart, right, when they have to change a therapist or a supervisor of the team of therapists, regardless who it is. You get to know them. They're not used to people coming in and leaving their lives quite yet,
Right.
whatever it might be. This is one of the biggest complaints, as well as some of the more serious ones we've mentioned earlier. And it really is never a personal matter, right? I'm sure anyone in that
Right.
situation has been faced with the feelings of guilt, and then also having to explain that, oh, wait, it's not you, it's just a business related decision here
Right.
and there. These things happen. Whatever pithy statement you want to add to it is definitely going to sort of help to move on from the situation, but it won't solve the problem and prevent it from occurring again.
Right.
The thing is, this wouldn't have happened if the organization provided a safe space for the
Mhm.
employee that did not overpush the quantity um, more than the quality of services and the quality of benefits for the em- employee. And
Right.
again, budget for these things, and in order to make business work on a financial level, this is where it starts, right? The budget is made, and then people are kind of trying to adhere to it, and that's why these things drop off and quantity gets pushed.
Right.
At the very beginning, I recommend anybody who's starting an organization, anybody who's getting ready to revamp their finances, make sure that you leave extra room in your budget for health and wellness, for employees, for additional admin time being used to assign appropriate caseloads and recruiting enough individuals in order to spread those caseloads effectively so that there is no high push on the quantity of services one person is performing over the quality of services one person is performing. This is a lot to ask, and it requires many components, but it's a major issue in our field today. And I do see many people trying their best to get ahead of it, to solve it. So props to you guys if you're doing that. Pat yourself on the back. If you were just out there at FABA in Florida, give yourself another pat trying to promote these positive changes in the field, that's really something that benefits us all, contributing to the field at conferences, at conventions, at large events that promote inclusion, wherever you can get your voice out to a community of people related to ABA, related to the community that you like to engage in. It doesn't have to be ABA, but if you represent people who are underrepresented, again, give yourself a pat on the back, because people need that acknowledgement, and they need non-contingently to be empathized with, for others to see that they're human, and give them the recognition that, okay, just the recognition that, okay, I'm not crazy. Other people have experienced this too. So, I hope the listeners out there, they're hearing some of these things and they're saying, okay, well, Martin, Michelle, and Dan, they've all heard those bad things about ABA. They've all experienced some of those unfortunate business conditions surrounding the field of ABA, and they're still here trying their best to move forward just like everyone else. Maybe I can feel acknowledged. Maybe I can feel the strength to move forward, and you can do it. So, keep going, keep patting yourself on the back, drink your coffee every day, unless the doctor tells you not to, but right. Do the things that make you happy, and don't be afraid to ask your employer for a little bit of help attaining that.
Definitely.
All right. Well, I know we are almost nearly out of time here, and I think that next week we should have a really good conversation about health and wellness benefits for autism, in particular, that really promote an understanding and a healthy company culture surrounding this business that helps autistic people and their families. And we thank you so much, Michelle, for helping us tee up our next episode and bringing your wonderful perspective to our show. And we hope to see you in the future in November out in Hawaii or online virtually via StreamYard. You guys have a wonderful weekend, and aloha. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone. See you all next week.